You're listening to the People's Podcast.
And we swagger when we walk, because by God, we can.
This is JSC Radio.
Well, Sharon, I was on West Florissant and Canfield, but my photographer, Alonzo, and I had to get out of the area. While shooting interviews and video, we found out our window had been broken into. Not just this window, but there was also a window in the back of our live truck. So again, we got out of there concerned for our safety, but we were there at the beginning of that vigil on Canfield and again, West Florissant. There were thousands of people marching. Then the crowd became violent. People started surrounding police cars, hoping to intimidate officers who eventually drove away. I did speak with a 13-year-old Aja Blackwell. She lives in that neighborhood, and she simply told me she was scared. What are you seeing? You said you're scared. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing people doing stuff like breaking into stores and stuff and just doing bad stuff.
What stores did they break into?
Quick Trip.
What did they take out? Did you see them run out with anything?
Everything. They destroy everything.
And you're saying that people are getting disruptive. What was happening?
Well, you know, it's not the family, because I'm part of the family. But the people up there started throwing bottles. They caused the police to come down here. It was supposed to be peaceful. That's not peaceful, throwing bottles and beer cans and stuff like that.
I've been reaching out to the Ferguson police chief. He has been helpful all weekend long with News 4. I want to know his plans to control the crowd. So I will continue to have updates online and on air. KMOV.com. Live in North County, Brittany Noble, News 4.
You're listening to the People's Podcast. This is JSC Radio. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is J. Scott Smith, but y'all already knew that. This is the 85th episode 85 of JSC Radio. Welcome back, y'all. I want to thank each and every one of you who support me every week. And every so often, I bring people on. And y'all know this. The history of this show, the 2.5-year history of the show, I've done so many different interviews. And yes, it's another dynamic woman. What can I say? I know a lot of dynamic women. This young lady has a journey that a lot of people may not fully get. But she's one of the voices you know of when you think of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. But she's far more than that. She's a journalist, she's an entrepreneur, and she's about to add author to the list as well. I'm sitting here, not in Philadelphia, taking this show on the road. I'm sitting here in Harlem, in New York City. New York City, yes, New York City, with Miss Brittany Noble. Brittany?
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me on. This is such a privilege.
Thank you. The privilege is all mine. And I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to me, because we've known each other for a few years. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to the first time I saw Brittany. She was working in Flint. We both worked in Flint, just in two different times. This was years back. This is at least 10 years ago for me when I was working in Flint. But I remember seeing you in Flint, and you've gone on to do so many amazing things.
Thank you.
So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, because it's hard to describe you as simply just a journalist now, because you've been kind of, and we'll get to your situation, but I want people to get to know you more.
Okay.
So first things first, what got you interested in being, of all things, a journalist, getting into this insane business that we found ourselves roaming around in? And tell a little bit of your story, just of you growing up.
That's it. I just kind of stumbled into it. I admittedly had a boyfriend that was a communications major when I was a student back at Alcorn State University, an HBCU, and I spent a lot of time in the communications department, in the radio lab, around other people who were studying TV and PR, and originally I wanted to go into PR. I felt like that made the most money, right?
Right.
And so I was only concerned about making money at the time, and then I realized that I was really, really passionate about TV and telling stories and being nosy and sharing the information that I get. And so it was just a point in my life. I think I was in my sophomore year in college, and I started praying, and I was like, I really want to do this, So God, how do we do this? And I really felt like God said, you will be successful, but you had to put in the work. And so from then on, I just started grinding.
Now you mentioned you went to Alcorn State. Now you grew up in St. Louis.
Alcorn State.
Alcorn State. Excuse me. That's the
Mississippi.
That fancy talk of those of us living in the Midwest.
There you go.
Alcorn State. We're famously known for Steve McNair went to Alcorn State.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard of Alcorn before. So you went to Alcorn State. You're originally from St. Louis.
Yeah.
Talk to me about growing up in St. Louis. I've only been to St. Louis a few times, usually working, but I had never gotten to fully get to know the city.
St. Louis is special. We're kind of still a southern town, even though we're a Midwest city. And I will say one of the biggest things you'll notice about St. Louis, especially when you're going there for the first time or meeting people there, they'll say, where'd you go to high school? And that's our way of actually judging how much money you have and what kind of neighborhood you lived in.
Same thing in Detroit, too.
See, that's one of those special St. Louis questions. But aside from that, we all love our baseball team. We're a big Cardinals town, and we love our good food, toasted ravioli and Emo's Pizza. And I do love St. Louis, but I really, really wanted to go to an HBCU when it was time to go to college. I graduated from a really small Christian school in St. Louis, and I just was ready for something different. So that's what got me to Alcorn State. And I would say they had a good recruiting department, quite honestly, because there was a few of us St. Louis people that were my year that went down to Alcorn too.
It is interesting because I've been in and out of St. Louis a few times.
Okay.
When I was doing my first go round with Griot, I ended up in St. Louis a lot because it's one of the it was, aside from Detroit, Chicago, it was one of those Midwestern cities that there was a lot happening in terms of African American life, essentially, and on all aspects of it, both in terms of sports, in terms of politically, into everything. This is pre-Ferguson, something we will definitely get to. You mentioned the Cardinals, for example. I grew up watching. I'm a baseball fan. Anybody who knows this show knows I'm a baseball fan. Ozzie Smith was the guy, one of those black players I grew up just kind of idolizing, basically, because I always thought dude was just the absolute greatest. So it's like I grew up with him. I remember when I interviewed Ryan Howard, because Ryan Howard is from St. Louis and he played for the Phillies, and the first thing he said was he always looked up to guys like Ozzie Smith when he grew up. I mean, unfortunately for me, being in Detroit, the Cardinals also ripped out my heart in 2006 in the World Series. But I'll leave that alone. I can't get the vision of Curtis Granderson stumbling around in center field out of my head. But it's just like, I look at St. Louis and I see so much similarity to a lot of different cities in the Midwest. A lot of the same issues with class, with race, and those of it. Because when you mentioned the high school thing, I went to Renaissance High School in Detroit. When you say you went to Renaissance High School, you're one of those super smart kids, or you come from those kids that have money. Didn't have money, but they assume you have money, or you've got this sort of upbringing, and they look at you, and obviously what you've accomplished. Clearly, it was they would have the right idea that someone like you would be able to go on and do all these things. How much of St. Louis kind of dictates what you do in your daily life? Like how much of that do you carry with you?
It's not just St. Louis. Everybody who knows me knows that I love St. Louis, and I carry a piece of St. Louis with me every day. In fact, I still have my 314 area code for my phone number. However, as a reporter, you see similarities between the different cities. You see similarities between Flint, Michigan, and East St. Louis, and Ferguson, Missouri, and Jackson, Mississippi, South Jackson. You see news stories that are the same. And so how much of St. Louis do I take with me? I take a piece of St. Louis, but I also take a piece of these other cities that I've worked in with me as well, because I feel like there are stories to be told from all of these different regions that could benefit us, and we're just not telling these stories. Briefly,
what was working in Flint like?
The sun never came up. It was so cold. I came from, I started working in Flint, Michigan after working in Jackson, Tennessee, and then working in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And I went to school in Jackson, Mississippi, or near Jackson, Mississippi. There you go. And it was so warm in the South, right? Oh, yeah. And then I go all the way up north and to Flint, and it was so cold, and I was the morning reporter, and it was like I was waiting the entire year for the sun to come out, and then the sun came out and then it left.
It makes cameo appearances.
There you go. The cool thing about Michigan, there's some hard workers in Michigan. I really learned about work ethic. A lot of us don't have money, but that doesn't mean that we're going to turn our backs on each other. It's kind of like we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
And like, let's pull each other up together. That's what I took away from Michigan. I learned some valuable life lessons there.
That's the thing, because being in Detroit, which is only 70-mile difference between Detroit and Flint, it's really, even though Flint's not a suburb, it's almost like a brother city to us, where we both we're brothers in struggle in a lot of cases, where Detroit looks at Flint and we're both like, yo,
the struggle is real.
We've been there. And it's like, we don't run from it, we don't hide from it. When I went to Michigan State, I ran into a lot of cats from Flint, because MSU, contrary to all the U of M love that just floats through that state, MSU was the first school in that state to really make inroads into inner cities like Detroit, like Flint, like Lansing, Grand Rapids, where they went out and reached out to African American students. So I got to really know Flint more so in college. And then when I worked out there, it's a similar thing. I mean, I was used to not seeing sun for 4 or 5 months at a time.
Yes.
And I know it gets cold in St. Louis, but there's a different kind of winter in.
Cold is cold. I will admit that. I am afraid of New York winter. I came up here a couple of times this past winter, but I think I'm already preparing myself for the cold weather.
Our winters
cold is cold.
Our winters are very aggressive. It's not just cold; it's aggressively cold. Like it's all in your pocket kind of cold. So you went from Flint at WEI, EYI, excuse me. WEI is a radio station in Boston. WEYI to KMOV.
Yeah.
What's that like going home for you now that you've kind of almost like a full circle type of thing? You've made it back home to one of the larger markets in the country.
It was certainly beautiful. I remember my dream for so long was just so that my grandmother could see me on TV. I never considered maybe she could see me nationally. I just wanted her to see me at home, right? And so for so long, I worked to get on TV in St. Louis. And so that was one of my more proud moments, is that the people in the community, they knew that I was off chasing this dream and trying to be on TV, but they really didn't understand it. And every other year I'm in a different city, but to see it all come together and to see me on TV in my home city and reporting on stories, and I know the area, that was a big deal for me. And being able to help out my own city, like that's one of the joys of being a reporter. You guys present a problem, and then I do everything I can to help solve it or bring it to light. And so I love doing that in my own town.
What's the kind of pressure like coming home? Because I know that when I see it a lot in sports too, like guys will go and play for the team in their city. If a guy from New York ends up with the Yankees or the Mets, or some dude comes home and plays for the Indians or something like that, there's an odd added pressure to it. What was it like for you knowing the city and knowing what you're getting coming in there?
I guess I got to a point I just didn't want to let anyone down. Like I just wanted to be successful, and I was going to do everything that I needed to do to be successful. I know that with success comes hard work, right? God had promised me in college I would be successful if I put in the work, and so I just constantly try to put in the work. But I'll tell you what keeps me up, Jay. It's my community. It's my support. It's my friends. It's my family. It's my followers. Reminding me that, hey, like you can do this. We're your support. We got your back. And so that kind of keeps me going as well, especially when you get tired and
you're dragging, and it's having
or you're getting up at 2:00 in the morning and you're like, why am I doing this?
that was my life for 2.5 years, almost 3 years in Philadelphia. It was the getting up at, mine was 3 a.m. and I would get up at 3 a.m. be there.
I was on TV at 4:30.
I still don't know. I've never understood how.
I never understood how I did it either.
It's tough enough in radio where you're getting up and they don't see you, and you can kind of drag a little bit into the studio. You guys are on it, like on point.
Yeah, hair and makeup and scripts, and it's a lot. It's a lot. So I'm looking forward to making this transition digitally.
What is it that people don't understand about working in TV? Because I know that people see the TV in as like, oh,
Jesus, what don't they understand? Everything. It's crazy. I don't know. That's so loaded. What do people not understand about TV? What do you mean?
I guess from your perspective, since you're someone who goes into TV and people probably see you, or people were seeing you every single day, and they're thinking, how is she just on it? When they see you standing in front of that camera, it's 5 a.m. and people's days are just getting started, and you've got the smile on your face, and everybody's ready to go. What is it that they don't understand is behind the work that goes into making that happen?
I wish that we got to keep the live stream up longer. when I worked at WJTV, because I would do these behind-the-scenes videos, which I still have online. You can find it on my social media. And that was a way to show people what was going on behind the scenes.
How the sausage is made, basically.
Yeah, because you see it one way on TV, and that's just not how it is in real life. I feel like I'm almost changing myself to be this TV presenter. So I'm changing my hair. I'm changing my voice. The people on my live stream will be like, did y'all just see her change her voice? And then, I intro a story, and then I'm like, what up, y'all? I'm back. And they're like, how did you just do this?
That wonderful world of code switching.
Yeah. So it's like I was living in two different worlds almost. And so it's interesting. It's just that people just maybe expect a certain look or expect a certain presence on TV, and you have to fit that mold. And then for me, it's all about content. For me, like at the end of the day, I am a reporter at heart. I don't care how my hair looks, my makeup looks, my dress. Like, I'm just trying to help folks or put this content out, these stories out. And so, yeah, it bothers me when it's like I've worked on the story all day and then someone's like, your hair is out of place. Like, really? For real.
That's what you see.
I've
sat here for 6 hours, and that's the first thing.
Right. Like, I done ran all over your city trying to get you answers, and all you know this is, okay, I'm going to start wearing the same black dress every day.
See how much y'all notice that.
Okay.
But then there's going to be somebody saying, she wears the same black dress every day. Does she have like 5 of those?
Brittany doesn't, she's getting to a point now where she just really doesn't care.
She does theirs.
I'm just, I'm just all about reporting at this point, which is the main reason why I came up to New York, is to find a different platform so that we can start telling some of these stories, so it doesn't feel like I'm not being myself. You're
not being authentic.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I know with you, the story that kind of really introduced everybody to you, or really started, it was, simply put, August 9th, 2014.
Yeah.
So you get wind of this incident in Ferguson, Missouri.
Oh, God bless it. These are just such difficult moments to talk about, but I'll go through them with you.
I appreciate that. And I know it's not easy, and I know it's not, because I think about when I've heard you retell this, and I've seen this with you. It's like the first thing that pops in my head is what it was like for me, having to kind of scramble together the words for when Detroit was dealing with the bankruptcy, because that was like our entire, really 40 years worth of it was just. It was all kind of coming together, and I'm dealing with national reporters who are asking me questions, and it's like, dude, I don't think you quite get this. That this is not just simply, oh, they didn't take care of their money. You're living in St. Louis, got Ferguson just on the outside of it. For those of us who didn't know anything or didn't know much about the whole relationship that St. Louis and its nearby suburbs and race and everything, for you, what is it like August 9th, 2014, when that becomes essentially you're one of the faces at the front of this story?
Yeah, so let's explain like Brittany's mindset at that time.
Please do.
Okay, so I was coming back from an NABJ convention. It was 2014. Wesley Lowery had just won Emerging Journalist, which is one of my very good friends. And, he's a newspaper reporter, a national newspaper reporter at the Washington Post. And so I was thinking, how is it that he wins this award and, TV reporters never get this visibility? And can you believe I was complaining about that? I was actually saying that out loud. And, I was complaining about how my station wouldn't give me any anchoring opportunities. They wouldn't take me off of weekends, just... my career felt stagnant. It's like, where do I go from here? And, my mentors and stuff at NABJ, you know how it is. And they're very encouraging. Like, you can do it, just put in the work. I'm like, okay. So I go home, and I think it was like the next week, because we probably had NABJ the first week, and then my guy the ninth.
That was Boston.
So, only days had gone by. And so... I had been doing this crazy shift where I would work dayside Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday till like 6 p.m., 6:30, do the 6 o'clock show, get back to the station, then leave. And then do this turnaround shift where I would get up early in the morning and work Saturday and Sunday mornings. So I'm exhausted. Do you hear me? Doing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday, I am exhausted. We had breaking news that Saturday morning. It was crazy. I had a engagement shoot. And we were out there shooting pictures, and we found out that Mike died. And I was actually living in Ferguson at the time. I'm from South St. Louis City.
Okay.
But I had moved out to Ferguson, and I had only been there like maybe 2 weeks. So I hadn't been there long. And when we found out that Mike had died and his body was laying in the streets, I called my producer and said, "Do you need help?" And she's like, "Yeah, please." I said, "Okay, I'm on my way in." So I didn't have anything. In fact, when I got there, I didn't have my reporting bag, I remember. And so I got there and I stole somebody else's notebook and pen. I even stole somebody's IFB, and that's gross. And then I went out into the field. And so what don't people see? What don't people know about Ferguson? They made it seem like Ferguson was a really bad neighborhood. And that's just not the case. Ferguson is a very nice area. It's where people like me from the city, it's like our county. It's, we went from one house in the city to, more space, more land out in the county. It's a better school district. So for us black folks, it's really a step up. Ferguson, for some of my coworkers, whom I love so much, okay? KMOV went through the fire with me after I called in my story, right? But with a lot of them, there are people that used to live in Ferguson.
Wow.
They lived there, and then white flight, they got out of there, and us black folks started moving in.
It's just like the Detroit suburbs, just like Philly suburbs, same thing.
And so Ferguson is just one town. I think there's 88 municipalities across the St. Louis County of smaller towns. And they're all kind of like Ferguson. And so when you see people getting upset, and when they were protesting in Ferguson, that wasn't just Ferguson they were protesting about. There was similar problems that happened in Ferguson that were happening in all these other smaller towns in St. Louis County. And that's something that people didn't explain very well either when we were in the midst of talking about Mike Brown's death.
It almost became like a sociology lesson as much as it was a story about a young man killed by a police officer. And it's where people got to look into what was going on in that part of the country that extended further out, because that whole story led to wholesale changes in criminal justice in terms of how things were handled out there too.
Yeah, but there's so much more that we could still dig into. And so that's why I'm like, we're going to talk about it, Jay. I'm not ready. Because it's hard.
It is. Oh yeah, I'm sure it is.
It's difficult to talk about some of these things, but just the way that we covered the story, we could have done such a better job. Period. And, I struggle with the fact that you probably wouldn't even know about Mike Brown had I not called myself into work. Truly, because it was just another young black kid that got shot. You know how they talk in the newsroom.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
oh, boy, do I ever.
Yeah. And so it's just like a kid gets shot, whatever. We'll get some video and move on. Had I not gone there and found some other parts to the story, or had I not used social media to share the story, it probably wouldn't have caught on the way that it did. So, it's just a lot to unpack. It was
interesting that you brought up Wesley, because Wesley ended up out there, and once things really picked up, my friend Tanzina Vega, who now hosts Takeaway for NPR, she was out there. And you were one of the first, because you were right on the ground and local. And I guess it showed the power of local news coverage for what you did. And I know it's difficult to talk about. And
the power of national, too. It's like I started the groundwork, but people like Wesley was able to come in and, follow behind me and take the story even to bigger lengths. If it wasn't for some of his reporting and the reporting of so many others that were on the ground, we wouldn't be where we are now. I just feel like I played a small part,
Well, yeah. I think, and I think that also kind of shows the type of person you are, that you feel that you played a much smaller role. I will tell you, as someone who was sitting in a newsroom in Lansing, Michigan, watching a lot of this unfold, because we were taking cues from that story. And looking around Lansing and thinking, because Lansing is really no different than a city like Ferguson. It's the same thing. It's this nicer area, racially diverse, but there was always tension there.
Yeah.
Tension with the police, tension with some of the... It was right there. And I'm thinking, this could have... I remember saying it in a newsroom as the only black guy in the newsroom, only black person in the newsroom. This could happen here. And what do we do?
What people didn't understand in that I was really passionate about people understanding is that in St. Louis, we didn't have any minority managers making decisions in TV news, like, period, in the city.
That's wild.
Absolutely insane.
That's
so here we
wild.
are covering what has become a civil rights movement, and we have nobody of color helping them make decisions. Like, oh, maybe we should put Brittany Noble back on the story. Like,
Caught
maybe
flat-footed.
this isn't a good idea.
Like they pulled you off that story, didn't
yeah, yeah. I never went back out there when the grand jury decision was made. They changed my schedule, so that I was only working mornings. Completely took me out of Ferguson. And when you're working for somebody, you can't necessarily be as vocal and talk about it. Yeah, that was hard. Just because there was parts of the story I felt like we could have done a better job telling.
It's an odd feeling being a black journalist.
Being silenced.
Having that mute button. Again, some of y'all know, I've mentioned it, I've made little references to it on this show of what it's like to get muzzled at a certain point in time. And it's not fun.
No.
It's not fun at all. And your work didn't go unnoticed, because you mentioned at the start of that you had just seen Wesley get this award at NABJ.
Yeah.
1 year later.
Isn't that crazy?
It's
just like, whoa, how did this happen? I never saw it for myself. But it's all about hard work, and sometimes we all look at somebody else and think that their careers came easy to them. And I can make fun of Wesley just because I know his career didn't come easy to him. I know how hard he's worked, because I've been there from.
Oh yeah, I needle him occasionally too when I see him.
Yeah.
So you're the next year, you're Minneapolis, getting almost the identical award that he got the year before, I think, he was emerging journalist.
Yeah, that was surreal. And, what was really surreal was the toast that they had for me. YBJ, Young Black Journalist, they do a toast every year. And it's to honor the person who wins Emerging Journalist. And so that year, after Mike Brown died, that was just a really emotional year for all of us.
Oh, I'm sure.
We were just all crying. And it was just like, what in the world are we witnessing? What are we seeing? What is happening in our country? What are we reporting? What can we do? Like, does our life matter? And so that was very, very emotional. And one of the reasons why I keep pushing, too.
Absolutely.
Because there's so many of us out here, especially black journalists, that are going through the same issues that you and I are,
Every day.
And one of the points that I made while we were in Detroit at our NABJ 18 conference is we did an interview with Detroit Public TV.
And Channel 56,
and
WTVS.
I said, y'all forget these news stations weren't created for us.
Nope.
They were created in the 50s and the 60s when they were supporting segregation. They didn't necessarily want the black voice or our viewpoint to be told.
Oh, yeah.
And we're still dealing with that.
Detroit is that rare city that I've seen where there actually has been a push in the local stations to get more of us on screen.
Yeah.
But you don't see it too many places. And I've been in Philly, in and out of Philly, and I sat in a newsroom where I'm the only black guy in a city that is 73% black and brown.
Yeah, there's a couple points to that. One is, at least they're putting black folks on the desk together in Detroit, because in Mississippi at my shop at JTV, I'd never seen two black anchors anchor together.
And
I don't know that it's ever happened before. Why you laughing?
If you could see the look on her face when she said
Keep
that.
me, Father.
I see, and see that's the ill thing is that I ran into that more than one occasion in Philly where I'm telling people like, no,
this is an issue.
We've got to hit this. Where they were so nervous.
Yeah.
I did a story about black Muslims because Philadelphia is one of the highest black Muslim populations in the country. Uh-huh. I did a story on black Muslims, and at first I was just straight up told no because who would really pay attention to this? Then I keep needling and keep pushing. Well, this could be controversial. We're not sure how we'll handle it. What about the Nation of Islam? It's like, dude, Nation of Islam is like an outlier amongst most black Muslims. Do not get down like that. Let me go talk to these people. And finally, I pushed and got the story. And the story was amazing because I'm talking to this woman who she has every bit of fear that you have being a black mother, but now it's ratcheted up because her son's last name is Muhammad. So now you have to deal with, you're already afraid your teenage son who's 6 feet tall is going to be in trouble. Now your teenage 6-foot son who also happens to be Muslim, it's like it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
And then I was able to get a hold of a guy who was the head of the Philly NAACP, but he was also a member of the Nation of Islam. And he talked about that perspective. Story went really well, but they just seem so astonished. And you have to fight for these things. And I see it when you talk about being in one of the biggest stories of the decade is Michael Brown. Wouldn't it make a little bit of sense to have somebody who kind of has, I don't know, this in common to kind of make that work a little bit?
One of the things that my executive producer told me in St. Louis, and, you know, I love him to death, but he said, Brittany, I just don't want to keep putting oil in the fire. You know, I just want it to die down. I just want to stop it. You know, they thought that if they didn't report the story,
It'll go away.
That it would go away, right? And we know that that's not the case.
That's not how any of this works.
And when I was in Mississippi, you know, I thought, you know, some of the content things I kind of fell out with KMOV about, and I really wanted to anchor, so I'm like, okay, we'll go down to Jackson, it'll be fine. But even there, telling some of the stories that I think are important, we didn't get to do them. And they would, I would have my bosses, one executive producer down there that said, Brittany, you're just not going to be able to tell these kind of stories down here. You know, you won't be able to do it anywhere down here. You need a national platform. It's like, why do I need a national platform when we can start uncovering some of these issues here locally?
Jackson, Mississippi, has got a lot of black people in it. I ain't been down to Mississippi
in
years. I've been in Alabama, but not Mississippi. And I know Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, they all kind of have, Arkansas, my cousin works in Arkansas, it's all kind of the same
And you know
thing.
what? It's not, when you're talking about content and bringing content to homes down there, if you're bringing news stories, it's not a black or white thing. You know, like if we were being properly portrayed in the media as black folks and white folks alike, if we were all of our stories were being told, if we all had a voice in these news meetings when we're selecting the stories, I think it would benefit the whole entire city. You know, we wouldn't necessarily be scared of folks that we had no reason to be scared of.
Right.
You know, or you just can be more educated when it's time to elect new people in the city. God forbid. We don't even touch that stuff because we're running around with Donald Trump sides and, you know, local crime stories that affect no one. So,
right.
So, you know, we kind of deal with that.
You're in St. Louis, hometown. You were part of, like I said, one of the biggest stories of the decade. It was kind of a culture changing type of story when we think about it in retrospect. And you end up leaving to go to Jackson, Mississippi. So you're back in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Having gone to college there.
Yeah.
What factored into the decision to leave St. Louis to go to Jackson, whole new market in the shade of the deep, deep South, where the Confederate flag is still in their state flag?
You know, I guess I wasn't even thinking about the Confederate emblem at the time because I had such a positive experience in Mississippi when I went there for college. So I guess Alcorn was in our own little bubble, you know, and we were just protected in that bubble. And so I thought that this was indicative of the entire state, but not so much. This was just the, you know, It's a little oasis. Reservation.
It's an oasis in the middle of all that desert.
Yeah. And so when I got back, you know, that was a little different. But my husband was going to seminary, and so there was a good seminary down in Jackson. I was familiar with the area, having gone to college down there. It would allow me to anchor the morning show, the noon show, which was about 15 hours of anchoring a day, which was time for me to improve my skills. And again, it was my adopted state. This is the area that I went to school. I felt like I was giving back. You know, I've already gone back to my home state and given back there. And there's something very special to me about helping out people that have already invested something into you. So, you know, a lot of people ask me why I didn't go to bigger cities at that point. I just felt like, you know, that was the right move for me at the time.
So when you got to Jackson, what's the differences between being in St. Louis and being in Jackson, Mississippi?
Oh, it was a difference in market size. And so when we talk about media, that was something, because the people that I worked with in St. Louis, I mean, I was the young person by far. of the like general assignment reporters and stuff, I was at least maybe 25.
So you were just the kid.
Years under them.
Yeah, you were the kid in the room.
Yeah. And so the producers and the investigative reporters, the anchors, I mean, I was just able to learn so much. You know, that was when I learned how to that's when I feel like I really, really learned how to report. Was when I was in St. Louis. When I got to Mississippi, it was a difference because the city is smaller, and so the people in the room, like as soon as I came in as like a leader, which was something different than I experienced in St. Louis. So my producers were younger and my reporters were younger, and this was like my team that I was overseeing. So that was very different than what I experienced in St. Louis.
It's a step down in market size, but in a sense, it's a step up in terms of responsibility.
Yeah, it almost helped me with my manager skills.
Yeah.
And being able to mentor other reporters. So I've mentored several reporters that were my mentees down there, and they're doing extremely well now too. So it was different than what I had experienced before, sure.
So you were there, you were morning anchor there, and that's when I really started to see you with the videos every day. And and you look perfectly fit for that role as an anchor, whether it's in Jackson or in St. Louis or Chicago or wherever. It's like that. Seeing you there is like, she fits. This is like it's natural for you.
It is natural, and I do feel like I do fit in that mold. But when I think about it, growing up, I was always a performer. And so I did a lot of plays. I sang a lot. I was always on stage in front of a crowd. And I realized towards the end at WJTV, that's what I was doing. I was acting, and it wasn't real reporting.
You were playing a role.
I was playing the game, yeah.
It does bring me to this. So you were there. You were doing, by at least from somebody on the outside, like you're doing very well, or at least doing pretty well. And then suddenly you're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So what brought about...
What happened?
What the hell happened in Jackson, Mississippi is what I'm basically going to ask you. How did we go from you being effectively a centerpiece of that station to persona non grata?
There were several different issues at JTV that should be addressed. And I think that we deal with a lot of TV media BS. We get it. But when now you have a child involved, now that I'm a mother, you cannot stay quiet about certain things.
No.
And so it became apparent to me that after I told them that I was pregnant with my first son, they stopped including me in commercials, and I stopped being allowed to represent the station in events. And, this is difficult for me because I'm small. I've always been very, very small.
You are rather petite.
And
I'll put it that way.
so when I was gaining weight, with my son and on TV, and this is my first pregnancy, and, I'm just like, my station doesn't support me. So we had issues with that. I didn't get a place to pump milk for my son. I didn't get a place to literally pump milk.
This is like
Crazy.
basic. This is crazy.
I got an email saying that they would allow me the storage closet during normal business hours. And you and I both know that I don't work during normal business hours. So there were like some things where it's like, hold on. We got to address this. And then, we had the issues with my hair.
Right.
When I came back from having Mich, and I'm like, okay, why am I putting this wig on every day? Why am I trying to flat iron my hair? My hair is falling out. I got a screaming baby at home. I'm trying to breastfeed. I'm trying to anchor. This is too much. Can I stop straightening my hair? And my boss was like, yeah, that's no problem. And then maybe a month later, he's like, your natural hair is unprofessional. It's the equivalent to me wearing a baseball cap to go to the grocery store. Mississippi viewers want to see a beauty queen. And so it was, a lot of these issues just, about our look. Jay's face right now.
I'm sorry. This is where we need the video feed. You can actually see my reaction to this. Please continue. Wow. There's a couple of conversations off air that we will have about some of the wonderful things I've heard before. But
so, yeah, it just got to a point where it's like, okay, content, you're shutting me down. You obviously don't want another black person to sit next to me on the desk and anchor the news. And we're obviously filtering some of our news so that we're not talking about certain things. But one, y'all got to remember, I am black.
Mm-hmm. Gotta remind people occasionally.
My real hair is an afro, right? We can keep straightening it as long as you want to make me into something that I'm not. But at the end of the day, like, God created me to look the way that I do.
Exactly.
So anyway, we just didn't get along.
Mississippi wasn't exactly.
We didn't get along.
I'm still tripping off the storage closet.
Okay.
Storage closet.
It reminds me of The Help. Have you seen The Help?
Now, of course I've seen
It's like
The Help.
I'm the morning anchor. This is not The Help.
They're going to put you in a store. Now, you may not say this, since I say whatever I want. That's some bullshit, first and foremost. They'll tell you to go into a storage closet to breastfeed, like you're basically some sort of animal. You have to be kind of
and you know what it is.
You
think about it. You know, the show started at 4:30. We go live from 4:30 to 7, and then I'm still on live until 9 o'clock. So it's really a block of time from 4:30 to 9. Do you really want your morning anchor to stop and go pump?
Exactly.
You're not going to say that out loud,
No.
but I think that's what it was.
Now, one day, obviously, a lot of this acrimony had been kind of building, and there had been different things and the slights and the issues with the hair. Your hair looks lovely, by the way.
Why, thank you.
The issues with your hair and everything else.
My first time having braids.
It looks. At
the African shop, they were like, first time. I'm like, yeah. Don't judge me.
No, we're not here to judge. No, there is no judgment. At least not of you. I'm judging the hell out of them, but not judging you. So there was this. Obviously, this had been building.
So my mentor, he's a big wig up here at one of the major corporations, and he said, "Brittany, you need to file a complaint." His words were, "They don't want a Megyn Kelly. You need to file this complaint and keep it moving. You should have filed a complaint yesterday." And I'm like, okay. Until I filed a complaint with our company, Nexstar, and then the retaliation, it was just...
It ratcheted up at that point.
Overwhelming. And so I ended up going to EEOC with the state. And so now they have the case, and federal investigators are looking into it. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. But it's just one of those things, like when my pastor would preach when I was in Mississippi about... giving everything you can, giving all that you have, all of your knowledge, all of your talents, everything that you have, like give it all away. And I felt like, the stuff that I knew about what we were doing and not doing on TV in Mississippi, things that we could get better, ways that we can better educate our community, then I didn't need to stay silent about it. And I need to start using my voice to talk about it. And so that's what I've been doing.
And the end officially came after a really devastating moment in your life.
Wasn't that crazy?
Of all things.
You know what I'm saying?
And please explain to them, because I can only do it so well. What
so
happened?
The EEOC said, Brittany, like, they're going to fire you, like, please. And I said, I guess once I filed the EEOC complaint, the investigators and stuff and the caseworkers were saying, Brittany, they're going to fire you. And I said, let them fire me. I said, do I have to sign an NDA? She said, no. I said, well, then let them fire me.
Exactly.
And so I got word later on, like, we knew my grandfather was sick. And with my grandfather, we're just very close. We share the same birthday, 9/23.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he basically raised me growing up. My dad wasn't around, and so my grandpa was. And so we're just extremely close. And so when it got to a point where he wasn't opening up his eyes, and I do a good job of like being able to put the BS to the side and present the news, because news anchors are going, we ain't thinking about news when we up there. It's just so much stuff going on.
Right.
But I do a good job of putting that stuff behind me. But when my grandpa wasn't opening up his eyes anymore, I was like, okay, I got to go home. Like, we got to go take care of grandma. We got to go see how the family's. I had to go check on my family. And so when I was there, sure enough, they told me that I was able to take my accrued sick time to go take care of my family. And they put it in the email that I was okay and they were doing everything they could to keep my check whole. But
okay.
That was not the case.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and they got rid of me while I was home taking care of Grandpa. So, which was fine.
Wow.
You know what? It's truly fine. Like, I have never been at such a better place. I'm happier. I'm at peace. I am still looking for opportunities to tell stories, but what I was doing there, I mean, I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy.
And you filed a lawsuit, correct?
Well, the EEOC, so hopefully the federal investigators, the state of Mississippi will probably fight this case for me.
Okay.
And so they're looking into that now. But every time we talk, I have more and more evidence, and they're like, whoa, let me look into this again.
It's stacking up.
Yeah. So I'm not really that worried about it. I'm just trying to continue pressing forward. And, it didn't have to come down to a lawsuit. I just wanted Nexstar to see the effects of some of the decisions that we were making in the newsroom and the impact that it has on the community.
It's usually how it starts, though, is that...
Like, it didn't have to...
It doesn't have to be this way.
No, not at all. Like, we could have had a sit-down meeting like, by the way, it's okay to have a black Santa Claus on TV. Like, it's 2018. That's acceptable. We can do that.
In Mississippi,
Oh,
boy.
We didn't have to go through all of this. But, one of the cool things that I can say from coming from St. Louis is that I worked at a union shop. And I'm aware of how you shouldn't treat employees.
Exactly.
Like, I know that it's not okay for you not to give me a place to pump.
It's not cool.
I know that that's not okay.
Right.
So you just have to stick up for yourself sometimes.
So how did we go from Jackson, Mississippi to sitting here with each other in Harlem, New York?
I knew that with local TV, I'm pretty much done. We've done Arkansas, Tennessee, Flint, Toledo for a little bit.
Oh, you did hit Toledo too?
Was it WNWO?
Yeah, I know somebody who works at WNWO.
And then St. Louis, Mississippi. It's like, how many more times can I go to an apartment, live there for a couple of years, pack up my stuff, move again? You form these relationships in the community. It's cut off. Like, I cannot keep doing this anymore. And to go back to our original point, the very beginning of the podcast, is that, there's similarities between all of these cities. And some of these stories can be told in one place to help a major amount of people. So, I'm just working to find out the best way to do that. And what I really love about digital is there's more room and more space to spend time investigating and digging into and, putting details in your story. I don't have that much time in TV news. Like, a minute 30, total with the anchor intro and the rap. And
even in radio, max time we were getting might have been 5 minutes, and that is a special situation. You get 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and
that's a deep investigative.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
So you're not getting no more than maybe 2 minutes on radio on a normal average story too.
Right. So digital allows more room for that. And, I've been contributing with NBC Black. So the idea that I get to tell stories for NBC from a Black perspective, it's like, this is what I've been looking for my entire life.
Yeah.
And then, also with Shadow League. You've heard of the Sports and Culture website. And, that's Black owned. And so I love having opportunities like this. And New York really is the mecca. All these media companies and startups. And you surely have a lot more options here than maybe St. Louis, Missouri, or Jackson, Mississippi.
Or Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah, so if you want to do it, it's like, go do it. Go. And so that's why I'm here. My dad's from East Harlem. And so I didn't spend much time with him in East Harlem when I was growing up, but it's fun to
So you've reconnected with him, essentially.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. He's not here. He actually went off to L.A., so maybe that's my next move, too. Because I love the warm weather.
No, yeah, these Northeast, East Coast winters they're not quite as aggressive as the Midwest winters, but they're still they ain't friendly.
But if you can make it through Flint, Michigan, you can make it through.
I think that's a metaphor for life. If you can make it through Flint, you get through.
You're right.
Damn near anything.
Flintstones. Shout out to them.
That's for real. So one of the things as we start to wrap this up. One of the things that jumped out to me, obviously, at the convention was you had these T-shirts, the Black Journalists Matter T-shirts. Mm-hmm.
Did you get one?
I'm trying to get one of those. Gosh. I can get one of those from you before you leave here today.
No, I had to order some more, but I just got approval from our NABJ president that we're going to go ahead and do some more.
Wonderful.
And so it's actually on my to-do list for this week. I was kind of looking for maybe a shop in Harlem that could work with us, or we can use our NABJ guy down in Mississippi that made the first round of shirts for us. So I'm working on them.
It's an amazing, very simple but very powerful message.
You know, it was one of the things that my friend said in that toast that I told you about, the emerging journalist toast back in 2015, where it was just that raw, emotional moment. And one of my friends, his name is Earl Arms, he was a sports reporter in Milwaukee at the time. He said, "Brittany, thank you for reminding me that Black journalists matter." And so I knew it was something special then. It just took us a few years to get approval from NABJ.
To get it down. But main thing is you got it down. I was joking with you last week, but at the same time, I could just as easily see that being on a coffee mug or being different things that really kind of getting that memo and that message out there to people. So you're now here in New York. You're working on a book from what I understand. How is that coming along?
It's, interesting. So I'm not used to writing such a big body of work, but since it's since it's mainly about me, it's been not as difficult as I thought that it would be writing. So now I'm just working to pair up with the literary agents, and I'm working to find somebody that I really mesh with, that really understands my vision of what we're trying to do. And so, I guess that's all I can say about it right now. But it's definitely about my rise to the anchor desk. Some of these untold stories that were filtered out while I was in St. Louis and in Mississippi. I mean, if I could start telling you some of the stories we didn't tell, like if you thought you were shocked before about some of the things that were said to me in the newsroom, you would be incredibly shocked about some of the stories that were not being told. Not being told.
Yeah, that's a convo we can have off air.
Yeah.
Because boy, there's some things in Detroit and Philadelphia as the dogs are in here barking. There's some things things you can tell in Detroit.
They're agreed.
Between Detroit and Philadelphia and Chicago that I dealt with that I wasn't even allowed to get into.
Yeah.
That brings me to my last question here. Imagine that you are a young journalist. Either you're sitting in a high school or you're sitting in a college, you're in college right now, going to that first internship, young black man, young black woman, and you want to get into this industry. What is something you would tell some journalist who's 18, 19, 20 years old and thinking, all right, I want to make a difference, I want to do this? What would you tell them coming in?
Well, first of all, don't think of it as money or a job. Like, it's really community service, is it not?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, our hours are crazy. We're constantly... It's just a hard industry, but as long as you are doing it to help other people, or as long as it's so different for us, because when we started off in this industry, it has changed so much from now until then. And before, it's like we needed somebody else to work for, and we had to do it their way. And now there's so many opportunities to, not even wait to get started reporting. You can do that now. I would say stay humble, stay persistent, and just keep going, especially if this is really, really what you want to do. But again, don't think that you're going to make a lot of money from it, right? And don't think you're going to have a lot of free time, because you're not. Everything is dedicated to journalism.
And people will see those who are making tons of money at CNN and ESPN, and they get
like,
blinded.
How do you answer this question and let people stay in journalism? Like, how do you answer this?
Because you don't want to be like those people who
I don't want to push them away.
Yeah.
They're like, this industry is hard as hell.
It is.
And truly only the strong survive. It is not easy by any means, but you don't necessarily have to wait to work for somebody else. You can go ahead and start writing and podcasting and, going live yourself. But yeah, it's a hard industry. We're here if you need us, though.
Exactly. So how can people reach you?
You can find me on social, The Noble Journalist, or on Twitter, it's @NobleJones on TV. You can find me Facebook, Twitter, IG, my website, thenoblejournalist.com.
Noblejournalist.com. I know, you're Noble Jones on TV on Twitter.
Yeah.
You're Noble Journalist on Instagram.
The Noble Journalist.
The Noble Journalist. Got to get the "the" in there. The Noble Journalist on Instagram. I can say it's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thanks
sitting
for having
here
me.
talking to you. Thank you for doing this. I consider it an honor to talk to you, especially now. I wanted to get you now because I know in 2 or 3 years when you are super huge, I'm gonna have to go through 5 people just to get you to talk to me. But no, I'm messing around with you. This was Brittany Noble, and thank you so much for coming on JSC Radio with me.
Hey, thank you.
And there you have it. another one in the books. Thank you so much to Brittany Noble for taking time out of her busy schedule. I know she was in Toronto last week covering something for NBC Black, which is where you're going to see a lot more of her work on NBC Black. Go to NBC Black. Just simply look that up. You will find all of Brittany's work on there. She's an amazing story of perseverance, and honestly, one of the more genuine people that I know in a business full of phony-ass individuals, let me tell you. Just want to also take a second to thank the Harlem Collective, which is where I did that interview. Yes, it was a little noisy in the background. It was very real. But the Harlem Collective over on 1867 Amsterdam in Harlem. It's on the corner of 152nd and Amsterdam in Harlem. It's an amazing place. It's got all these different kind of offices and rooms. It had a nice conference room that was set up for me. There's a young lady named Zia Lynn who was there, who helped me get set up. She was wonderful. Go check out the Harlem Collective, especially if you're in New York City or in North Jersey and you're looking for a place to set up shop for a day. You can rent them by the month. And it's a great place to do a podcast. Plus, you never know, you might be visited by a cute dog in the middle of doing one of them. My name is J. Scott Smith, telling you to take care of yourself. God bless. Always dare to be different. Always have your pets spayed or neutered. And we are out of here. Remember to adopt and not buy. And to all you newcomers, thank you so much for joining us for this first time. Let's make sure this is not the last. Subscribe to the show across all your favorite podcast providers and join us here next week for episode 86. But until next time, goodbye, everybody.
Are not being told.
Yeah, that's a convo we can have off air.
Yeah.
Because boy, there's some things in Detroit and Philadelphia as the dogs are in here barking.
Yeah.
There's some things there's things you can tell in Detroit.
They're agreed.
You're listening to the People's Podcast.
Have you ever been unemployed? Were you nervous then? Yeah. All right. Then.
This is JSC Radio. I want to, of course, shout out our friends at Miracle Whip. Yes, that tangy zip of Miracle Whip. You've been seeing the whip wear all over social media. The t-shirts, the hats. Hell, we got one right here in the JSC Radio studios in Philly. If you want one of those t-shirts, if you want one of those hats, hell, one of those shirts was even made in the Motor City. Hit up whipwear.shop, plus head over to miraclewhip.com for every possible recipe you can find for the tangy zip of Miracle Whip.